what to do if the keywords of a website are constantly in a decline from the last 30 days, and after making changes or even publishing new content, it doesn't rank or pick up any keywords. Well, then it may be a domain penalty, it may be a link penalty. Um, it could be both. So, if the domain is penalized, then changing the keywords isn't going to improve it. Like, because why is the domain penalized? Is it over optimization? Is it spam? Is it technical errors? Is it crawl resistance? Is it a poor backlink profile, an over optimized backlink profile, toxic links pointing to it, whatever? What is the reason? There are so many variables that can cause a site to tank. You need to first identify you have to try to find the source and correct it at the source. Because again, guys, I was just mentioning this on another call earlier today or whatever, but if you remember, there's like SEO is a collection of things, right? It's like, in other words, in order to achieve top ranking performance, you usually have to do fairly well across a lot of um, sections. Like, in other words, there's a lot of components that go into a proper SEO campaign. And any one of those can break down or cause problems if done improperly or too aggressively or whatever. And when you have a lack or a deficiency in one area, it's very difficult. It's often that you can't make up for the lack or the deficiency in one area by overdoing it in another. Do you see what I'm saying? It's hard to overcome poor optimization or problems because of deficiencies in certain areas by overdoing it in others. It's better to have a holistic approach to try to cover all bases. Now, I'm not saying you can't get results with deficiencies in certain areas and also trying to compensate in other areas. You certainly can. I'm just saying it's more difficult. And it's better if you take a more holistic approach. And so when analyzing a site that is dropping in rankings, you have to try to look at it with a broad lens and a broad view, and try to figure out what are the main components that could be causing this problem, and then start investigating. Honestly, it depends on the project too, though, because I found that I've done this even in like one of my own tree service lead gen brands that was the first big multi-location lead gen brand that I had ever created. And I started it in 2000 and I think 14. So it would have been 10 years old, but it was about 2 years ago when the domain caught a penalty, and it was a multi-location domain. And at one time we had 22 Google business locations for that one brand. Over the years, I lost a few from suspensions, and then I rebranded some of them to a different brand. So by the time that the domain finally caught a penalty, I think I had 13 locations, and it caught a penalty. The domain did, and so the GBPs ranked fairly well, still, most of them anyways. But the website itself tanked in organic, and man, I spent 5 or 6 months trying to recover that site. Could never get it to recover. Like, I don't think it was a link thing. I checked on it. Of course, that was before I was real heavy in the link building. But so anyway, long story short, after 5 or 6 months and trying all different kinds of things to recover the domain, I just bought the same domain but with a different extension. I bought a .org. It was originally on a .net, and I bought a .org, and I just started moving sites from all inner pages. So I used to have location landing pages as inner pages of the main domain for all those locations. So I had multiple locations with a separate location landing page for each location, but it was all part of the root domain. So they were all inner pages. So when I bought the .org domain, I just started building standalone sites, WordPress, on subdomains. So instead of an inner location page on the root domain, I was creating standalone, pretty much one-page tree service sites on subdomains of the .org domain. So each one was its own site. That way, if I was to catch a penalty again on any one of the sites, it would be isolated to that one subdomain. Whereas the root domain caught a penalty and it affected all 13 locations at the time. You see what I'm saying? So, and just by switching from the root domain to the new domain, which was on a .org and subdomain sites, the site started to come back up in organic search. So what I'm saying is why I brought all that up was because if you have a domain that is declining and you can't I mean, certainly, especially depending on your backlinks and all that other kind of stuff, you may want to try to recover that domain. I get that. So I'm not saying don't just abandon it right away and transfer the site to a different domain. But if you've exhausted all of what you think you can try and nothing solves it, then you may want to consider transferring the domain or the site, excuse me, to a different domain, right? Because sometimes that's the only way you can recover a site, right? I would encourage you again, check on it. What are the things that you've tested already? I don't know. You can't, this is a very short question. It doesn't have enough context for me to be able to provide enough insight, but there's a number of things you can check, right? Go look at Search Console. Does it have a manual action penalty? Search Console usually won't tell that unless it's like a very significant, penalty of some sort, like pure spam, etc. So if it doesn't tell you in Search Console, then it may be an algorithmic penalty. One thing you can do to check is it an algorithmic penalty is just do a search for the domain name. Does the home page pop in the #1 position? If the home page does not rank in the #1 position for a domain search, that means literally just search Google for the domain, whatever it is, .com, .net, whatever it is. And if the homepage doesn't appear in the #1 position for that, then it's likely that there is a penalty applied to the domain, right? So that's one way to just check very quickly. But there are so many different things that can be looked at. It would be hard to kind of go through all of them right now. All right. So I'm going to move on.